Hello and welcome to the Love of the Star podcast, ladies and gentlemen. He's Brian Broaddus, Super Bowl winning scout, and I'm Eric Chiafalo with the G-Bag Nation. Great to have you in Love of the Star Tuesday, June 3rd. OTAs fully underway. We got a lot to get to here in Cowboys land, Brian Broaddus. Happy Tuesday to you.
Thank you.
Want to just start off with just asking you, as you are super plugged in throughout all these OTAs, what is the most interesting one or two things that come to mind with what's shaking out right now?
Yeah, I think we're starting to hear some positivity about with Sanders, Williams, the running backs, and how maybe they might be incorporated, maybe the fountain of youth a little bit through the first couple of media practices that we've had, with that looks like that Sanders has a little juice to him, catching the football well. Boy, that would be a good thing for the Cowboys if all of a sudden that Miles Sanders could reclaim some of that ability that he had when he was playing in Philadelphia. I have my own questions about the running back position. I love with the selection of Blue, interested in Maffa. But if you're telling me that Williams and Sanders could also bring something to the party, oh, that's very, very encouraging in itself. So excited about that. Excited about the fact that the wide receivers are, different guys are stepping up and making plays. And we all keep the focus on CeeDee Lamb. We keep the focus on Pickens, but we need to focus on some of these other guys too. How's Tolbert playing? How's he adapting to it with the new receiver coach? Jonathan Mingo seems to be a guy that every time that we get the media availability, and you're going to hear me say that a lot, media availability until we actually get to training camp and put our own eyes on. I know you and I have to do our show during the afternoon. That's the one thing I do appreciate about Mike McCarthy. He would practice before our show, so I was able to watch all that. But from what I'm hearing, the reports, all those things, very, very positive about Mingo and how he's been able to make adjusting catches. I think that when you also think about what's going on with Elam at cornerback as well, these are things that to me are going to kind of dictate how things are going to be at the cornerback spot. Are we going to see what's the competition there? Is Elam going to be a guy that's going to step in and be the starter opposite Bland? Have they figured out nickel stuff yet? These are all things they're working through in the OTAs. Excited to kind of hear that kind of news. Kind of looking at Elijah Clark, the safety from Syracuse, undrafted safety, hearing that he's getting work with the ones. They're throwing him in there. Here's a rookie that, kind of a little bit of a slightly built guy, 187, 188 pounds, kind of a true free safety player. But, the Cowboys gave him a significant signing bonus. I guarantee you when I go over there and talk to somebody, they're going to tell me, well, we had Clark in the fifth round on our board and we went and got him. And, that's just like getting an extra draft pick right there. You get somebody off that draft board, but you get somebody a rookie that immediately steps in and takes some reps with the ones just to kind of see how he's doing it and no worse for wear. Those things are things that you kind of look for in these OTAs. Next week, we have the mandatory mini camp, which all 3 days will be able to evaluate. And then that's it. These will be the final 3 days of the organized team activities. Then the front office, the coaches, everybody will take a break basically until we report to Oxnard on July 21st. So there, if you're talking about potentially signing guys, I know, Eric, I'm covering a lot of ground here, but you just kind of rolled the ball out there for me. But could be the opportunity if they're going to add somebody. Maybe there's a June 1 cut. Maybe there's some players that we're not really talking about very much that they might want to add for some depth pieces. This would be the time to do it. From June 1st until about the time that the OTAs are over. That's kind of your window right now for signing anybody if you're interested, because after that, everybody says, we'll see you football for about a month.
Absolutely. Okay, I love it. That's a great breakdown of where things are at right now. I do think it's interesting the undrafted safety out of Syracuse getting some look with the ones, and part of it might just be the time of year that we're in, and they're just wanting to see
absolutely
different guys in the mix there. But I also think it speaks to hey, there's going to be some competition here at the safety spot. You're seeing it with Toya and with Mozzie. I've been seeing that Toya's been getting plenty of first team looks as well as that one technique. So, and especially for a team that's probably going to be depending on a lot of young guys. That's how the Cowboys do it: draft and develop, throw these guys into the fire a little bit. So, and the receiver stuff that you're talking about is interesting because that I can't help but just imagine. Okay, if you got guys not named CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens making plays, how much of that is because the scheme is actually finally now helping wide receivers maybe get open a little bit easier and playing to their strengths a little bit? And that's something that we're obviously dying to see in this Cowboys offense, certainly hopeful. So I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a very good point. I know last week coming out of the practice, the scheme appeared to be Cowboys working on quick game, talking to Bobby Belt, Todd Archer, and others that were attending practice, the hitches, the short game, and everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. We're talking about the same kind of passes that Mike McCarthy, it's the hitch, it's the out, it's the simple stuff. Where's some of the vertical things and all that? And I think there were some folks out there in Cowboy Nation that were panicking like, oh, is this what the offense is going to be? Is it going to be a dink and dunk? Is it going to be just hitches and, that kind of thing? I just feel like this is just part of the installation. What they're trying to do is they're going to put stuff in during these OTA. We don't get to see all the practices. So there might be a practice where all of a sudden we get to watch a dink and dunk practice, and then we all get to lose our minds that the offense is going to be based on dink and dunk. When in actuality, the day before, you didn't see the 4 passes they threw down the field to George Pickens where he and Elam got separation and all that. I think the Cowboy fans, yes, there's things that are going into the installation part of it, but what they want to make sure of is when they get to Oxnard, they really don't want to be teaching this stuff. They want to be like, okay, who could take what we talked about in the classroom from the OTAs and the mini camps and bring it to the field in Oxnard? Because then, they're going to play a preseason game against the Rams. And then from that point on, it's, Atlanta, the Ravens, a couple more preseason games. But then it's going to be about getting ready for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's going to be about, okay, we've given you OTAs, mini camp. We've given you a week, 10 days of training camp. Now it's time you're either going to make the team or you're not going to make the team. So so don't panic out there, Cowboy fans. If you hear, the hitch game, short game, quick game, screen game, don't panic about that. That's just part of what they're trying to install right now in order to get to some of the other things that we'll see every day when we're in Oxnard.
Yeah, and all those routes, all those concepts, quick game stuff. That's in every single offense across the sport. Right. It's just is that 95% of your playbook, which is what it's felt like for many years with the Cowboys, or is that just something that is a part of your grander scheme? And hopefully that is the direction that Schottenheimer's taken this. Now, one of the things brought us that I've taken away from this that gives me a ton of encouragement and is leading me down a path of maybe my hottest bordering on being confident that this is not just going to be a okay offensive line. I think this is going to be a good offensive line. It started with the coaching staff, but obviously the Tyler Booker stuff there is huge at right guard. But then seeing and hearing the stuff coming out about Tyler Guyton, and Schottenheimer's been very adamant about talking about Guyton in a positive manner, saying that he's had a terrific offseason. He's been working his tail off and he looks great. And then hearing Tyler Guyton after practice the other day with the media talking about how he thinks he's figured out a lot about what he needs to do to take care of his body, being able to play at a high level. He says, following the guys that have come before me, understanding that the routine is very important. He feels like he's learned a ton. And he also goes on to talk about how, there's going to be ebbs and flows, but he understands that it already happened. Last year is in the past. He's going to be moving forward, learning from it, the mistakes that he made. He says he's got a lot to prove. He's got a lot to work on. He notes that he didn't do good last season and he wants to be better. He says, I want to be the guy that can be depended on. I just feel like I had a lot to prove and I needed to work on things. Getting in here earlier was the way I was going to do it. I'm not going to be making any excuses. I just didn't play as good as I needed to last year. And he says he's coming in with a different attitude this year to become a much better player. He's got his diet dialed in. He's lost some weight. He's not doing the fried food stuff. So seems like the professionalism is really starting to crank up for Tyler Guyton, the attitude change. And it also leads me down a path where I'm wondering, okay, I've been lamenting the way that McCarthy and the coaching staff last year handled Tyler Guyton, because we all knew last season with the way it developed, that goes down. Like, this is not a championship season. This is not a playoff season. Let's go ahead and make sure our young rookie left tackle gets as many reps as possible. And so we've been all frustrated about that. And to some extent, I still absolutely am, because it's like, dude, this guy needs to get reps. But also I think there's some element to that lighting a fire under Tyler Guyton to propel him into this offseason with a newfound attitude and professionalism to get to where he wants to go. Like, you were a first round pick, you barely played. We got Chuma Doga in there over you, bro. That's how bothered we are by the way that you're playing and just how you've approached your rookie season. And so as much as I wish he had a lot more reps under his belt as a rookie, I think that probably helped him be like, okay, you know what? Let me go ahead and let me attack this in a different way here. And so maybe there are some positives to the way that McCarthy and these guys handled him last year.
Yeah, to me, this is where I'll disagree with you on that. And it's hard. This is the hard aspect of things. Tyler Guyton, not a lot of experience, needed experience, wasn't playing great, really immature, all things that you totally addressed. This is where I think that, to me, that, and Jerry Jones, and I say this in a way of, I'm saying I'm disagreeing with you on this, but this is where Jerry Jones, as a general manager, should have said, you know what, play Tyler Guyton, play him. But you're also got to be mindful and somewhat respectful of Mike McCarthy and them trying to save their season. Trying to say Tyler Guyton was in a no-win situation. Probably had a line coach that wasn't very happy with him. Had a front office initially that wasn't very happy with him. As you can tell, he wasn't very happy with himself. Very immature. Didn't know what it take to be a good pro. Really, unfortunately, nobody tried to help him to become a good pro. There was nobody. Zach Martin was your veteran guy, playing banged up, playing hurt. Did he, did he reach out to Tyler Guyton? Probably, maybe he did. But Tyler Guyton maybe was stubborn and didn't want to take the coaching. Thought he had all the answers, So, but this is where you have to, if you're the general manager, you have to tell them, play this kid. He hasn't had a lot of work. Play him. But the coaches could come back at him and Jerry and probably say, he's not ready to play. If you want to get somebody hurt out there, put Tyler Guyton out there. So it's kind of it's a bad situation all around. He needed reps. He needed to mature. McCarthy needed to play him. He's trying to save his job. This was really a bad year overall. And yeah, I appreciate Tyler Guyton coming out and saying, hey, I wasn't mature. I needed to learn. I needed to get better. I needed to work harder. Trying to address all those things to not be a detriment to this football team. A lot of things were against him last year, including himself. That was, I think, the biggest problem, that himself was, there were times where during training camp where we would report about him having one or two really good reps against Micah Parsons. And you're like, there's hope here. But that was few and far between. I do appreciate the fact that he is owned up to his own faults. I wish that Jerry Jones would have told Mike McCarthy to play him just to get him the experience. But, I think we are where we're at right now, and hopefully that'll be better things going forward. But there were a lot of things in fault for him not playing well last year, including himself.
100%. And maybe that was sort of a rock bottom situation for him. Yeah. And now he's clearly come out on the other side with a newfound professionalism.
he could have been in a situation much like with Terrence Steele, and we talk about this, and Terrence Steele under Joe Philbin was a better player. Under Mike Solari, there were moments where he didn't even look like the same player. So you wonder about the line coach, you wonder about guys being in the doghouse, you wonder about technique, scheme changes, all these things, and how they affect these linemen. It appears that they've gone the right route. When you have an OC that's a former line coach, and you've got a top-notch college offensive line coach now coming in, so you've got a couple of guys there, and hopefully that will be something that's the first building block. But it's going to take Tyler Guyton having that come to realization meeting of himself that he wasn't good enough and he was a detriment to this football team. That's a great start for that. So I am hopeful. I think Tyler Booker is the complete opposite of what Tyler Guyton was coming into this situation. I think this is more about plug and play than it is like we've seen in the past with the Dallas Cowboys. Just go back through the history of the offensive line and go back and look at how they've been able to put plug and play guys in. Tyler Guyton wasn't plug and play. He wasn't ready to be plug and play. Tyler Booker is ready to be plug and play.
Yeah. So all in all, I mean, my optimism for the offensive line is just going up and up and up right now, and that would be a huge factor in if the Cowboys are going to shock some people this season. The offensive line is going to have to be much better than it was last year for sure, and much better than what most people's expectations are for it right now. Tyler Guyton and his maturity, the professionalism, getting his body right and everything like that, plus the new coaching staff, that's a definite step in the right direction there for that unit. All right, we'll get to the Dean Julia mailbag here in a few minutes, but you're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Broadus, before we get to the mailbag, I did want to bring up what Schottenheimer has done, and he's dipping back into the past a little bit and bringing Cowboys legends out to OTA practices and having them out on the field, having them in the position meetings, and just having Cowboys, former Cowboys, legendary Cowboys, just kind of breathing life into and sharing some wisdom with the current roster. And Michael Irvin is now on record. Guys like Tony Casillas now on record talking about, hey, they came away from those Schottenheimer practices and those meetings feeling like, man, this thing's heading in the right direction. We know Schottenheimer's trying to get the culture in the right place. I think it's a great idea to have these former Cowboy legends who's been there, done that, knows what it means to have a championship culture for the Dallas Cowboys. I love what Schottenheimer's doing here, and I'm encouraged that these guys are speaking so positively. It's easy to do that now because you're not losing games at this point. But I think this is a brilliant move on Schottenheimer's part.
Yeah, we haven't. I can go all the way back to the first time you didn't have a guy who was a Cowboy coach initially under Jerry Jones. So when Bill Parcells came in, what ticked a lot of people off was guys like Jim Burt, the old nose tackle from the Giants. He was bringing old giant players in to like talk to and be around and be observing and all that. And everybody took that as like, why are you doing that? These are guys that the Cowboys had battled for years, and what are you doing here? Bill, I think Bill took the wrong approach there. I think there was some times where, where like Chan Gailey, that really didn't do anything. Wade Phillips didn't really do anything. With Schottenheimer, this team does have a great history. I mean, you could take this team's history all the way to 1960 if you want to bring Roger Staubach around and others to be a part of that. That to me is a positive thing. Mike McCarthy really wasn't interested in bringing anybody around. I mean, you saw guys kind of show up and stuff, but it wasn't an open door. Having your history show up and kind of be a part of the culture that you're trying to do, I think it's a good thing. I think that Michael Irvin initially was not too happy with the hire of Brian Schottenheimer. I don't think he was. I think Michael had to be turned on that. I'm sure somebody in the comments or will say how broadish, you're full of this and you're wrong. But I didn't feel like that Michael Irvin. I think that Michael Irvin was looking for a process. He was looking for Ben Johnson, or he was looking for, hey, go out and interview, go out and try, go out and find a guy. I don't think he was initially just enamored with the Brian Schottenheimer hire, but it took being around Brian Schottenheimer, seeing maybe what he's trying to do. I will give these former Cowboys credit. I would give Michael credit. I'll give Emmitt Smith credit for being outspoken about the team when it hasn't been good. Mm-hmm. It's very easy and Troy Aikman at times has been very outspoken that, hey, this team is not good enough. And I appreciate that. That as a Cowboy fan, you're like, hey, if these guys from days gone by who were the pillars of the National Football League were a dynasty team in the early 90s, trust me, I competed against those guys. They are the championship players. I don't even know how to describe it. Those guys were tough to compete against. So if they're coming in and talking about, and they don't have to be back in the day guy, but you could just talk about if you're a young guy and you go up and you ask, hey, Michael, when I wasn't born when you were doing this, but what was it like? What was it like to go against Deion Sanders? What was it like that's where these guys can really, really, really help. They can really help with, you want these players to feel the history of this organization. You want them to learn. Players don't do a good enough job of learning who the players were who came before them. And Schottenheimer's giving them an opportunity. And I hope the players take advantage to talk to a Roger Staubach if he's around, to talk to a Drew Pearson if he's around, to talk to a Michael Irvin if he's around, to talk to an Emmitt Smith if he's around. I just, I hope they take advantage of that, because this franchise does have a great history. And it's not that old of a franchise, but it's got a great history to it. And I hope that the players appreciate what Brian Schottenheimer's trying to do for them.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned Staubach. I actually had, I'm 31 years old. I didn't get to soak in the Staubach days. So
incredible player.
Dude, I do a Bible study with some high school coaches. And so it's a Bible study that's geared towards coaches. And so they have like all these little stories about different people setting up whatever the study is for the day or whatever. And they had a tidbit on Staubach and about how like the fourth quarter comebacks, and it's like 23 fourth quarter comebacks in his career, but 17 of them are in the final 2 minutes of games.
He was Pat Mahomes before Pat Mahomes. Yeah. And I say this in respect. You talk about a mobile ability to escape. Now, this era had some quarterbacks, Fran Tarkington at Minnesota. They had quarterbacks that could play on the move and Roger Staubach was no different. You watch the modern day Pat Mahomes play. That was what Roger Staubach was doing for me as a Cowboy fan in the 70s when I was growing up. And Captain America, Captain Comeback, call him whatever you want. You knew when you got the ball back for him with a minute left in the game, down by 4, 5, 6, whatever, there was a chance you were going to win that football game. But he was the 70s version of what Pat Mahomes is today. Mobile, get out of the way, escape, launch it, prayer of a play. That was Roger Staubach. Going back and watching him, there was none better, and didn't have a long career. Maybe a lot like Troy Aikman's career, not a long career, but man, what a player!
Yeah, man. He's a highlight reel quarterback who also had the clutch gene and struck fear into opposing defenses and fan bases.
Called his own plays.
In the final 2 minutes.
Yeah, called his own plays and a lot of it's crazy. It was a really an era of quarterback play that Like I say, if you just think of what you see today with Pat Mahomes, that was what Roger Staubach was for the Dallas Cowboys in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I did some reading up after that because it intrigued me. I was like, wow, I should have known this about Roger, that he was such
incredible,
just a clutch monster. But I was seeing, like, back in like the 60s and stuff, it was sort of an unwritten rule that like these guys weren't really working out in the off season. They weren't
they were selling
weight.
cars. They're selling cars. Yeah.
And I was seeing something about Roger where when he was doing his military stuff, lights go out, everybody's going to sleep, and he had like dumbbells and weights under his bed, and he would be working out it just right next to his bed. Everybody else is going to sleep, the lights are out, he's in the dark, and he's still getting that work in because he knew what he had to prepare for. I absolutely love it, and I love what Schottenheimer's doing, bringing in the old legends.
Absolutely.
Hopefully Staubach's a part of that. But I mean, you talk about, like, Michael Irvin was raving about the accountability that he was seeing, and that's a tough needle to thread, to have a sort of a fun, exciting, happy to be here work environment for your players, while also being able to sort of get in their rear end a little bit when they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, this is all fun and good until you start losing football games.
Absolutely.
So, the ping pong table, great. Paintball game, great. All this, good. Team building, good. Everything's good. But if you really, really want to do a favor for Brian Schottenheimer and this coaching staff, go win football games. Because then there's the buy-in. It happened with Dan Campbell. It happened when you watch what once they went and won a meaningless game to keep Green Bay out of the playoffs on a cold, frigid night at Lambeau Field, that's better than any ping pong table or paintball game or Michael Irvin coming to talk to the team. That is what you need to have. You need that kind of buy-in. And all this is going to, and I'm not trying to be wet blanket guy, but I think people are smart enough, they understand. All this is fun and games is cool because we're not playing games. But the minute this thing doesn't work, that it looks like that they're not playing well, or they're not prepared, or the attention to detail is not there, all that you start to hear, well, glad they had a ping pong table there in the locker room. Glad they went and played paintball today, instead of working on plays. Find a way to win, because trust me, this fan base will let you know if you're not winning.
100%. Got to win some games, Shotty. All right, you're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Broadus, let's go ahead and dip into the Dean Julian mailbag here. Just got a few questions before we wrap up. We have Tyler Keith Smith on Twitter asking if we've heard anything about Sam Williams, his recovery, and how he's been bouncing around at OTAs right now.
Yeah, it's just he's working with Britt Brown over there and trying to get him back. So it looks like to me this is going to be something that we'll see in training camp. This is the injury is now almost a year old, and everything that it appears to be is he's close to coming back, but it's likely going to be training camp time period for his return to be on the field.
Yeah, he got hurt in training camp last year in Oxnard. So that was a bummer at the time, but that obviously gives him a leg up in terms of full recovery, getting back and being ready to rock and roll. He's a guy with big time explosion. Love the way he plays, reckless abandon, just got to be more consistent and more dependable. But hopefully, man, if he can come back and you get Micah and Sam Williams, you get Azaraku, you get Fowler. I mean, those are four legit dudes getting after the passer, and it's a big time year for him. Really a make or break it year on the last year of his deal. So hopefully Sam Williams is rocking. Glad to hear he's with Britt Brown though, and taking the rehab seriously. Let's see here. We have Robert DiCenzo. Which player do you think, Broadus, will surprise us with their play this season? Maybe in a good or a bad way.
I really do. I think people need to take notice I think Jack Sanborn is going to be a really good linebacker for you.
Mm.
I think that, and again, this is a guy that not many Cowboy fans, they know the name, they haven't seen him play, but you watch him play with the Bears and how he's able to um, read scheme, put himself in position to make plays. There are people in Chicago that didn't quite understand why the Bears didn't do something with him. But I think the Cowboys got a player that they took advantage of because of a new coaching staff in Chicago. But I think Jack Sanborn is going to be a guy that people are, when it's all said and done, we remember what Eric Kendricks was able to do, play with some instinct, double-digit tackles, those kinds of things. So, yeah, I kind of feel like that this is going to be a guy that you need to keep. There will be a lot of talk about him positively in training camp, and we will be able to. And I think he'll play at a very, very high level for you.
I love it. Yeah, he's absolutely a guy on the radar that I'm excited about. I think he's just going to be a solid linebacker, something that they desperately need for sure. Got the familiarity with the scheme and everything. So I'm with you 100% on Sanborn. We have Larry Lunchmeat 7 asking about George Pickens and how realistic it is that he ends up being re-signed. Have you changed your thoughts on that? I think when the deal got down, we all felt like this was going to probably end up being a 1-year rental. Do you still pretty much feel that way?
Yeah, unless some things change. I mean, me personally, I would love for them to get Micah done. I'd love for them to get Bland done. Maybe they're having to make the decision. Maybe it's going to come down to Bland or Pickens, or do you move on from Diggs? But yeah, this one appears to be that Pickens is going to play at a very, very high level. David Mulugeta, the agent is going to tell him to keep his mouth shut, march straight, do whatever they ask you to do, and we'll worry about things at the end of the year. I was hopeful, like I say, if you could get Bland done, if you could have got Parsons done, then you would have the availability to use a franchise tag on Pickens if needed, and then you negotiate as the season goes along next year. We'll see. But I do think Pickens is going to play at a high level. And if he's able to keep his mouth to himself, then a lot of people are going to go like, okay, maybe Pittsburgh was the problem. Maybe it's not the player that was the problem. Maybe there's something going on at Pittsburgh. But this George Pickens has a lot on the line. He goes and poops in the bed, with his attitude as a teammate, all those things, and it becomes he's combative and things. Then he's going to lose the opportunity. Nobody's going to sign him. I don't care how talented he is. This is a really, really, really important year for George Pickens. But Dallas doesn't have a lot of weapons to deal with. To maybe if they might have to use that franchise tag somewhere else, and it might not be on George Pickens. So hopefully they can work on some things in order to assure that if he has a really nice year, that they could try and re-sign him. I have my doubts. Me too. And I don't have. It's not because of the person or the player. I have my doubts because they might look at other avenues. They might look at other things. Like it might be more important to them for Bland and others to get. They got Smith coming up, and I think they got a 5th-year option thing on him. But they might look at it as like, well, George Pickens was good, but we can't pay another wide receiver $25 to $28 million.
Right.
That's how they might look at it that way.
And then our buddy Brandon Laurie kind of touching on what you just mentioned, like other guys that could get contract outside of Micah. Do you see them trying to get ahead on any of these deals? Who would be at the top of your list?
Yeah, it's always difficult because it appears that they're always working from behind. I'd love to be able to say that they got out on the Bland deal and got it done and all that, but I don't know how you could look at Bland, or I don't know how Bland looks at the Cowboys and doesn't feel like that he's not a better player than Diggs. That's difficult in itself. Coming back from the injury, all the rehab, everything. He's been a model player for you, and so I think that one's going to be a very difficult one to deal with. Parsons one, maybe by the time we get to training camp, Jerry and Steven will make an announcement that they got Parsons done. That thing's going to be at $40 million, maybe slightly south of that. Who knows? But that's, they're just, it's kind of never ending for them. They just have not had that good fortune of being able to have these contracts stagger. And I mean, stagger how they've come down. It always seems like they have 2 or 3 guys that they have to get done. They never have the one and then another and then another and another. It's always all together. And that's made things very, very difficult for them.
All right, well, that'll do it for today's episode and the Dean Julia mailbag. Thanks to all of our fantastic listeners and the great questions. Broadus, you're the man. We'll be back in the coming days with some more Cowboys content. Until then, have a great week, everybody.